Welcome back. In 2022, I filmed in the Pyrenees along the Spanish-French border for a television series. I recall that in 1939, my father Luis left Barcelona at the end of the Spanish Civil War and crossed those mountains to avoid capture. I'm joined now by a man who's been to the same majestic mountain range, also in the footprints of an ancestor. Adam Hart is the great-grandson of RAF pilot Frank Griffiths, who was shot down over occupied France in 1943 and escaped through the Pyrenees in the opposite direction to my father from France into Spain, which was neutral, even though sympathetic to the Axis powers. It's exactly 80 years since Frank crossed the border into Spain. Adam, welcome to GB News.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell me, how long have you known about this story? Has it always been circulating within the family?
Pretty much since birth, yeah. It's always been a family tale told at many lunches and dinners and things like that. So it's always been family folklore, but it's always sort of been slightly different depending on who tells it, and the characters vary a little bit and the details will vary a little bit. So really going to the Pyrenees and doing this whole retracing was partly to find out just exactly what happened.
Your great-grandfather was brought down, I think, near Annecy in France. Now, that's not particularly near the Pyrenees. So what was the connection between being downed in one place and then making this journey over the Pyrenees?
Yes, exactly. So he was shot down near Annecy in southeast France. His crew were all killed, 5 civilians too. It was a complete miracle he survived. He had terrible injuries coming away from the crash, really should have died. And he was taken in by the French resistance, who deemed that he wasn't fit enough to take the Pyrenees route to Gibraltar to get back to Britain. So the original plan was to get him to Switzerland and then to get him to northern France and then to be picked up by Lysander and go back to England that way. What happened was the plan all fell apart. Basically, the Gestapo were in town and all the resistance contacts went to ground. So he ended up being taken in by a new resistance network, and they operated in the Pyrenees. So they couriered him down to the Pyrenees and he had to trek over the mountains instead.
Had he had time to recover from his injuries? Because he actually crossed the Pyrenees in, I think, just about 3 days. So he was having to do a lot of miles every day, wasn't he?
Yeah, incredible distances, really. I think they did 80 miles over 3 nights. But he hadn't really recovered. He'd spent a month in Switzerland recovering, but his shoulder was broken. He had a broken wrist, whiplash, massive head trauma. You know, he was still scarred in the face visually. And, you know, he was 31, still recovering, really. So it was absolutely brutal trek for him. I mean, when myself and my uncle retraced it, we tried to do it as faithfully as possible, and we had to take an extra day because we just couldn't keep up with the pace they were setting. And they were doing it at nighttime with the fear of capture. So it really was an incredible trek for him to have to do. And I mean, just for some details on the trek, just how brutal it was. I mean, at one point, Frank twisted his knee in a river crossing, and on the other side, on the other side, he decided to take his fatigue tablets, which were basically a form of meth. So you have this 31-year-old pilot trekking through the Pyrenean mountains in the middle of the night with some complete strangers hallucinating on meth with a dodgy knee and a 19-year-old American airman who happened to be escaping with him at the same time. So it's just that's just one crazy detail from a totally crazy story.
We're seeing some photographs there of your expedition. You had a wonderful encounter with descendants of the people who looked after your great-grandfather.
Yes, I did. So the Sacquet family, who are Pyrenean farmers, they took in Frank on his first night in the Pyrenees. And after walking sort of 30 miles with him from Perpignan, and two of the boys, 14-year-old boys at the time who were guiding him, they wanted an English lesson in the daytime. So Frank gave them one while they were hiding and waiting for darkness to set off on the second night. And at the end of this lesson, Frank gave the boy his French-English pocket dictionary, and it said Frank Griffiths, Englishman, in the front. And obviously they didn't know each other's names or anything. After the war, Frank wanted to find these people to thank them, but he didn't know their names. Eventually, 30 years after the war, the Sacquet family happened to see Griffiths in the front cover, got in touch with the RAF Escaping Society and managed to find him, and he went back out and said thank you 30 years later. And then 30 years after that, I went out with my uncle and basically did the same thing, and they still have the dictionary. It's still one of their most treasured possessions, and it's a really spine-tingling moment just to be presented it. Really an artifact that takes you straight back to that moment.
That is absolutely fantastic. And they gave you a slap-up lunch as well. This must have been quite an emotional meeting, I think.
It was incredibly, yeah. I mean, there's such, this happened 80 years ago, but there's such a strong, palpable link between our families, really. I mean, they were risking everything to save my great-grandfather, who just happened to be a British man escaping through the Pyrenees. They didn't have to do any of this. And the consequences were death, essentially. Death, torture, deportation, a really, really grim outcome if they were caught doing this. So, and everybody around that lunch table knew that when we were there 80 years later. And there was a moment where our host just toasted to Frank and toasted to her ancestors. And there weren't many dry eyes around the table. The wine had been flowing and it was a sunny, beautiful day, but it was a really beautiful moment. And just to think about what they had done for our family, it was incredible.
Adam Hart, that is a beautiful story, and may I congratulate you on making that expedition. And you and I are wearing our poppies today with this very much in mind. I mean, it actually brings the suffering and the sacrifice of the war years into our memories. Thank you so much for being with us on GB News.